High casualties are reported in Syria, with at least 1,000 civilians killed by militant Islamists in the country's west, in Latakia, Hama, and Homs.
Christians are being targeted. Here is the message the Christians are hearing across the country. Wait until we get a good grips on the land and we're gonna step over your neck. Your turn is coming next.
We are being killed. All of us, all the Alawite and the Christian.
They challenge every single Muslim individual. Are you a true Muslim? If you are a true Muslim, you live by what the Quran dictates, you follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad.
What is the mental furniture that someone would have in order to be able to carry out some of the things that we've seen, basically?
Yeah, so there's a lot.
I want to make a disclaimer that the content in this video is not for tiny eyes or ears. So if you have kids, please don't have them watch this video. We need to be aware of it. We need to be in prayer about this. And then we need to understand why this is happening. So I'm going to play you guys a few clips just to show what's happening. And then we're going to begin to answer the why question. Let's start this. This is a video where the guy is bragging about the number of people who have died.
اجت الاخبار هلا هذا رقم اكيد يعني العدد صار 9000 من هدلوك بالساحل تم السعيد حتى الحيتان بالبحر عم تشكرنا حتى القرش سمك القرش عم يتشكرنا على الدعم الانساني والغذاء الذي كله الحمد لله وصل العدد ل 9000.
And in this other video, they're being made to howl and crawl like dogs. Why is this happening? Is it just political? Is it just some local particular conflict? Or is there an undergirding paradigm? Is there a pattern that we can actually trace to see why this is happening at a deeper level than a mere local geographic conflict? Because boy, it sure seems like there's a lot of local geographic conflicts. Let's get into this.
When you look at the Quranic Arabic, there can be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 interpretations for every word. There's only certain things in the Quran that scholars agree are concrete, like the concept of God, afterlife, things like that. But beyond that, there is a wide range of interpretation, which is why there is a history that not many people look at, and that's part of the problem, that nobody's actually looked at the history of debate within Islam about every sort of aspect that can come to mind.
I disagree with that. The reason why I disagree with it, it would be more accurate, Ziba, if you said the scholars that you find attractive say that. But there are a bunch of scholars with a great number of following in Islam and all of them are self-appointed, by the way, because there's no hierarchy, there's no seminary of Islam, except a University of Al-Azhar, and we know the products of Al-Azhar. But there are scholars like Bin Laden who say we have to take
He's not a scholar
the Quran
by anyone's
he
measure.
has the greatest following. He has
That's
the
not
greatest
true.
following. The Islamic Brotherhood, Hassan
not true.
al-Banna, when you look at the Sunni Islam, when you look at Ayatollah Khomeini in the 20th century, the most influential guy of Shia Islam, another self-appointed scholar, you have all of it. Sheikh bin Baz, he has the greatest following. Sheikh al-Qaradawi, maybe these are individuals that are not attractive to you, but then it would be more accurate if you stated that. They are attractive to many Muslims, not thousands, but in the millions. And what they say, and that's why they're influential, is they challenge every single Muslim individual. Are you a true Muslim? If you are a true Muslim, you live by what the Quran dictates, you follow the example of the Prophet Muhammad.
Their interpretation,
and those
though.
scholars who insist on that are far more influential, far more powerful than you soft-spoken, wonderful, cuddly scholars.
Okay, so now if you're like me, you're probably wondering, within this debate that's being talked about within Islam, within the theology of Islam, how is it weighted? How many Muslims fall onto the radical side? How many fall onto the more progressive side? And how has this played out historically as well? And also, what verses are being looked at? In the next two clips, we're going to get into answering some of these questions. The first one is Nabil Qureshi, and then David Wood is going to answer a question about what is motivating the type of thing that we're seeing happening right now in Syria. So let's get into this.
Chapter 9 of the Quran is the last major chapter of the Quran to have been composed, and it is the most expansively violent. This is the one that starts off by saying this is a disavowal of all the treaties we have with polytheists. Chapter 9, verse 5, slay the infidels wherever you find them, lay siege to them, take them captive. Chapter 9, verse 29, fight the Jews and Christians until they pay you the poll tax and they feel subdued. Why? Chapter 9, verse 33, Islam has been made to prevail over every religion. So, I mean, chapter 9 is the most violent. It's the culmination of the Islamic message. It's the marching orders that Muhammad leaves Muslims with, which is why when he dies, Muslims conquer 1/3 of the known world within 150 years.
Right.
These were the
By
messages.
the sword.
Well, it's complex. Once again, they would tell places, if you do not convert, then you have the option to pay a tax. And if you don't pay that tax, then
This
we
is
will
called
fight you.
The jizya. tax.
Exactly.
And do you basically see this as effectively the modus operandi of groups like ISIS today?
Well, this has been the classical understanding of Islam up until the fall of the Ottoman Empire. No Muslim really ever had qualms with it. It's what it was, and this is the means through which Allah had given Muslims dominance around the world. And it wasn't until Muslims had to as a culture, flip the script and start playing the defensive, the victim card, which they hadn't done before. So, for example, the Crusades. Many Muslims will point to the Crusades now and say, this is another example of Christian sort of superiority complex and trying to keep us down and oppressing us. The Crusades were never even discussed in Islamic literature. There was no Muslim or Arabic word for Crusades until Christians came up with one in the 19th century.
Okay.
It just wasn't a part of the Islamic mentality until the Ottoman Empire fell, the Islamic world started losing its power, and then these discussions started happening. And that's why you don't hear the phrase, Islam is a religion of peace, until the 20th century.
That simply wasn't a phrase.
It was never said. It was never thought. That wasn't the way Muslims had thought up until that time.
What is the mental furniture that someone would have in order to be able to carry out some of the things that we've seen, basically?
Yeah, so there's a lot. So Surah 98, verse 6, calls Jews and Christians the worst of creatures. The people of the book who reject Muhammad are the worst of creatures. So notice we're lower than dogs. We're lower than dogs. We're lower than pigs. You can go to the hadiths and you find all these interesting passages where Muhammad starts claiming that Allah turned a group of Jews. Some people misrepresent and say that all Jews were turned into other creatures, apes and pigs and so on. It's actually a certain group of Jews, according to Muhammad. But at first, he doesn't know what the Jews were transformed into. So he starts coming up with all these hypotheses. One day someone cooks some lizard and offers him a lizard, and Muhammad says he doesn't want to eat the lizard because this may be a Jew. The lizard may be a Jew that Allah transformed into a lizard because he's angry at the Jews. There's another passage where Muhammad actually advocates his followers perform a weird kind of scientific experiment. It's a weird kind of scientific experiment. He says if you put sheep's milk in front of a rat, it will drink the sheep's milk. But if you put camel milk in front of a rat, it won't drink the camel milk. What is this? This is the proof that these rats are actually Jews that have been transformed into rats. And he says they don't drink camel milk because you're not allowed to. Jews weren't allowed to. And so he says these are rats that were once Jews, and they're still kosher. They're still following Jewish dietary restrictions, even as rats. Wow. And so eventually Muhammad discovers that it was actually apes and pigs that the Jews were transformed into. So you have those kinds of passages. You have Muhammad saying in Sahih Muslim that he eventually decided to expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula and not leave any but Muslims. So notice it's first, hey, we're all on the same side. Then it's all of you have to be off this entire peninsula. You can't be in Arabia anymore. There are Muslims who would look at all this and just find this repulsive, even though they can't admit it because they'll be called traitors by other Muslims. But there are Muslims who will look at this and say, oh, this is horrifying. This is evil. This is bad. And if you can actually show them, well, this goes back to Muhammad. The source of these ongoing problems and it's not just there. It's in all kinds of places. In Nigeria, Christians are being slaughtered by jihadis. India, Hindus are being slaughtered by jihadis. Right there, Israel, Jews are being slaughtered by jihad. What's the common thread here? Because you could say, hey, the problem isn't us. The problem isn't Muslims. The problem is the Christians and the Jews and the Hindus and the Buddhists and the atheists and the Yazidis and the Sikhs and the Zoroastrians. They're the problem. But some people actually look at it and go, what's the common element in all of these issues. And if you trace that back to Muhammad for them, then they see it. And it's just one of the most common reasons that people leave Islam is they become repulsed by the violence that it keeps causing. So we need to be aware of situations that are going on in the world. When something is a result, you don't want to just blame everything on Muhammad if Muhammad's not, it doesn't actually have anything to do with it. But if the root cause of some horrible problem in the world goes back to Muhammad, we need to be able to point it out for our Muslim friends and say, look, this is your prophet here. Do you really believe this? Do you believe this is a good idea? You just condemned it, but here's your prophet ordering it. So what's going on here? And you will see lots of people leave Islam, but you'll also see people become more radicalized. And so we've got a lot of work to do here.
Well, I want to end by saying, if you are a Christian listening to this, pray like you've never prayed before. And if you're a Muslim listening to this, which I know I have some Muslims in the audience, I pray that this would be, that the cognitive dissonance that you might be feeling in a moment like this would allow you to give way to self-reflection, pause, consider, and actually look in the mirror at this moment. And like everything David Wood has said, if it's really true that this is actually trickling downstream from the Quran itself, I really think that's something to pause and consider and reflect on. I say that with love. I don't have any hatred towards any Muslims whatsoever. I love you guys listening to this. But I think that because of that, sometimes love corrects, calls out, and points towards darkness in order to expose what is light as well. So with that being said, any last thoughts, David Wood?
No, just once again, bad situation in the world, and it's going to keep getting worse. And we got the gospel, and we need to share that.
I just want to, with whoever's still watching this video, just offer the situation up to you, God. You are in control. You are the king. You work all things together for the good. And I just pray that you would be near to those who are going through this. And I pray as well that you would bring about salvation through it, God, and redemption through it, and reconciliation through it, Lord, that through the blood of the martyrs and through the testimony that the enemy would be overcome. And so we ask you for this, God, in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.